More than 3,000 foreign plants have become naturalised in the Australian environment since European settlement. 32 of them have been recognised as weeds of national significance, or WONs. WONs is a multi-government initiative to prioritise and strategically manage weeds that pose threats to primary production, human or animal welfare and the environment. One of these 32 weeds of national significance comprises 6 species belonging to the asparagus genus. Asparagus weeds were introduced to Australia from southern and eastern Africa in the mid to late 1800s, mainly for ornamental purposes such as hanging baskets and garden plants. Until recent times, the flowers and foliage of Asparagus declinatus, bridal veil, and Asparagus asparagoides, bridal creeper, were commonly used in weddings. These weedy asparagus species are no longer traded commercially, but some are still exchanged by home gardeners and they remain extremely common in gardens. Asparagus weeds, easily dispersed by birds and foxes and often dumped by uncaring gardeners, have spread into native bushland where they cause major negative impacts. They thrive in habitats that range from moist temperate forest to harsh coastal dune systems. This is Asparagus aethiopicus, common name ground asparagus. It's a perennial, low-growing herb with sprawling or arching stems that arise from a central crown. The stems are up to 2 metres long, and they have many short branches and short, sharp spines. The fruits are glossy berries. Initially green, they turn bright red when mature, and they're very attractive to birds. So dealing with this weed before it fruits will greatly slow its spread. The stems emanate from a single point. That's where the crown is. The crown is a compressed group of underground rhizomes that forms the central growing point for the stems. This plant has been dug out of the ground in its entirety so that we can see what's going on below the ground. You'll notice that radiating out from the crown is a dense mass of feeder roots. These are used for nutrient uptake and they firmly anchor the plant in the ground. These tubers emanate from a root rather than a rhizome, so they can't reproduce. They store nutrients whenever the plant is dormant, thereby permitting survival from one year to the next. It's a relatively simple matter to deal with this plant. Wearing strong gloves, locate the rhizome and cut the stems off just above it. Any berries should be stripped and bagged, or if too dense with berries, simply bag the whole stem. Now we have to remove the crown. Clear around the rhizome as best as possible. Our task is simply to cut the roots and tubers away from the crown. They will be left on the ground, but we must remove the crown in its entirety. Plaster saws are very effective for this, with occasional resort to a peter lever if the going gets tough. The roots and tubers can't reproduce, so we just leave them in situ. Just remove the berries and the crown. Be aware that even a small fragment of crown can grow a new plant. Several species of asparagus weed form a dense tuberous root mat just below the surface as opposed to a crown. Controlling these species means removal of the entire root mat. Asparagus asparagoides is commonly known as bridal creeper. A native of southern Africa, it was first recorded in Australia in 1857 in a nursery catalogue. By the 1870s, it had become a common garden plant. The passage of another 50 years saw it naturalised right across southern Australia, from Victoria to Western Australia.
It's growing up on the canes of lantana here, and it looks like it's not in very good shape, and indeed it isn't. It's starting to lose all its leaves. Bridal creeper drops all its above ground foliage in the hotter times of the year, and it's coming into summer now. It produces some bright or dark red fruits that are quite attractive to birds, and these stems will continue to hold those fruits long after the leaves fall off, making them available and attractive to birds. The birds will disperse those fruit around into the bushland. And so what I'll do is I'll cut a fairly wide swath around the plant with this plaster saw. So what we can see now is this fairly intense underground root system. And what you're seeing here are lots and lots and lots of small pointy shaped tubers, and these tubers are storage organs, storing nutrients and water for the plant to allow it to survive underground throughout the summer season or the hotter seasons of the year. What is really critical about bridal creeper and bridal veil, Asparagus declinatus as well, is they both form these really dense tuber mats under the ground. And these tubers are connected by rhizomes. And the rhizomes are the growing parts of the plant, and new stems generate from those rhizomes. So you can see here that we've got, just move these roots away. You can see here that we've got new stems, or stems shooting up from along a rhizome. And all these tubers are connected into that rhizome. And we'll just break this one open and have a look at it so you can see what it looks like. Okay, there we go. So you can see right there in the middle the whitish rhizome that's holding all those tubers together. They're sort of spiraling off that rhizome. Because these tubers are set so closely together on that rhizome, you have to remove the entire tuber mat from the ground. If you happen to leave this small little cluster of tubers in the ground, it still has some rhizomatous material on the top of it, or growing material on the top, and can form a new plant from that. So it's really important to get what we call this grubbing, so grubbing the whole root system out of the ground to get all these rhizomes.
Asparagus declinatus is another mat-forming species. A native of the Cape region of South Africa, it's been present as an ornamental garden plant in Australia since 1870. Naturalised populations were first recorded on Kangaroo Island in 1954. It's since become a highly invasive environmental weed in South Australia. Small populations have also been found in Western Australia and Victoria. Bioclimatic modelling indicates a potential to invade across southwest Western Australia and coastal regions of South Australia, Victoria and Tasmania. The dense underground root mat consists of underground rhizomes with closely packed bulb-like ridged tubers. Because the tubers are so closely packed together along the rhizome, it's impossible to separate the two, so the entire root mat must be completely removed to ensure that there's no regrowth from the rhizome. Plant material above the ground generally dies back in summer, but beneath the surface the root mat can be up to 1 metre deep in sandy soils. In mature infestations, the underground root system comprises up to 85% of the total plant biomass, and this means that Asparagus declinatus can survive year-round, long after it's dropped its foliage in the hotter months and even through extreme drought. Because Asparagus declinatus is a threat right across southern Australia and Tasmania, we must be able to recognise and promptly deal with new infestations. The ridged tubers are striking and the foliage distinctive. When tubers break off, there's usually some rhizomatous material still adhering to them. Left in the ground, this tuber would produce a new plant, so it's important to remove both tubers and rhizomes to prevent resprouting. These rhizomatous root mats can take many years to decay, and they can impede restoration efforts. Entire root mats can be removed and disposed of carefully, but be aware that follow-up and site restoration will be necessary. The best defence is to learn to recognise this weed and control new infestations quickly before root mats can form. Asparagus plumosus, common name climbing asparagus fern, is a native of Kenya, Uganda and South Africa. In Australia it's a weed found mainly in the southern and eastern coastal regions, predominantly near major urban areas such as Brisbane, Sydney and Adelaide. Asparagus plumosus has the potential to significantly alter habitats by dominating and destroying the canopy layer.
So we've got a pretty good sized climbing asparagus plumosus here. Climbing right up into the canopy, 10-15 metres maybe, dominating the tree canopy here with a native vine, you can see as well, wrapped in together with it. So all of these stems here are Asparagus plumosus. One of the things people will do in really dense infestations is we cut away a bit from the top, and a bit from the bottom. You can leave the vines hanging in the trees. This is going to be far too high for us to be able to access the fruits. So we'll have to come back to this site repeatedly to make sure we get new seedlings that will germinate once the vine is removed. Yeah, it's starting to go there. Okay, there we go. Wow. Oh, there it is. Oh, wow, that's a monster.
That's a bit of work.
Yeah, Well done. But the really important part, so you don't need to remove all these roots from the ground. The really important thing that you have to get is this rhizome. And that rhizome is running, you can see all the sprouts where the shoots coming out of the rhizome there. I'll cut those away, and then we'll go and have a look at the actual rhizome. And again, this is the key part. Getting rid of this bit is what you need to do. I'm going to try and cut through this so you can see it. There we go. So you can see there's multiple parts of that rhizome in there, hidden, buried all in these roots. And any of this will resprout if it's left in the ground. Hopefully, see this defoliate and the vine will die standing here in the tree and open up the canopy again to natural light.
Asparagus scandens can invade relatively undisturbed bushland as well as open woodland areas. In New Zealand, it's the most widespread and damaging of all the asparagus weeds, and this suggests that Australian biodiversity could be seriously impacted if it's not controlled here. Rhizomes are spread by road-making machinery along roadsides and also in dumped garden refuse. Seed is spread in water flows and in mud adhering to machinery.
See how it's got the cladodes on this lay horizontal and flat along the stem?
Yeah.
Whereas on the asparagus it's radially around the stem.
Okay.
The other interesting thing with this particular species is, compared to the rest of the asparagus, is no thorns. And even here too, look at this. It's using the bark of the turpentine to start going up.
That's incredible.
Look how thick it also is here. Look at that. As you can see, it doesn't mind getting up and climbing to the tops of things. This is a turpentine sapling, and it's going right to the top of that with no problems at all. It's pretty much finishing flowering now. Most of the flowers have dropped their petals, and we're just starting to get the beginnings of the immature fruits forming right just inside here. You can see the petals are not long dropped, and the fruit's starting to form. Before starting doing a weed control, it's always a good idea to clear your site where you're going to be working on. Make sure that you've got a good vision of what you're doing, just for safety's sake. Clear the leaves away, work out where you're going to be cutting. With this one as well, you can cut the surface one off. There's no fruits on these, so there's no fruits to be collected and dispose of. Now take your gyprock saw, and what we're trying to do here is get to the crown, which is the corm in the centre. Clear off some of the dirt. Now we've left the roots in the ground. That's not necessary to get them out. There's a series of crowns through the middle of this one, just there, and that is what the plant arises from.
So we found a patch of Asparagus falcatus, which is a new and emerging asparagus weed in Australia, and one that we think we can actually tackle before it gets too bad. The problem is we don't know much about it, so we'll go and have a look and dig some up and see what's under the ground. 2-3 centimeter long thorns on it. This is a younger cane here, obviously, climbing up into the trees. Now we can see the foliage here. And it's quite different foliage to a lot of the other asparagus species. And I'm going to try and pull it down from the canopy a little bit so we can see it better. It's very, very thorny, really nasty plant. Oh, goodness. It gets a blackish purple berry. Large clumps of small white flowers, very typical of asparagus species. And there you can see look at that. You can see the typical asparagus form. It looks like something you might see in the grocery store. So we're going to have a look at a smaller plant because I'm not game to tackle that big one yet, and see if we can dig this up and see what is going on underground. So you can see the canes. It's quite small compared to the other ones, but the canes are starting to climb already up into the trees. This one's right on the edge of the road, so it's not quite yet up into the canopy. They are really hard going. Now, it does look like it's all coming from a central point, so that's a good thing. This infestation is more than likely come from roadside dumping. Just trying to loosen it up because I don't want to lose any. Oh boy. Okay, see what we got here. Just gonna give it a tug. Looks like we've got a crown system here. Wow. Ooh, sorry about that. Cut off some of these feeder roots. Wow. There we go. We've got looks like a nice crown here at the base of it. Just see what we've got. Small tubers there, attached by long roots. So not part of the rhizome, which is good. Oh, there's the rhizome. Or in this case, call it a crown because it's a dense cluster of little rhizomes there with the stems rising off along that rhizome, all clustered together. So just by removing that crown system, we've effectively killed that plant. We don't have to worry about the roots or anything in the ground. We'll just leave that there. That will die.
Asparagus africanus is another crown-forming species of asparagus weed. It's commonly known as climbing asparagus. Introduced to Australia from southern Africa as a garden ornamental, it's escaped cultivation to become a major weed of bushland.
Asparagus africanus is typically considered a tropical or subtropical species, and the current distribution of it is restricted to probably northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. But we've actually just found this infestation here in urban Sydney. This is very typical for asparagus weeds. They've come over the garden fence, been tipped out, and this one is doing really well here in a urban park setting. You can see up here someone's been trying to control it, but we've got long vines, old dead canes that have come up into the canopy. You can see the size of these canes. This plant's been here quite a while. We can see here the live canes. You can see the really dense, spiny thorns, a couple centimeters long, really hard, woody. We have ripe and unripe fruits. These are the ripe orange to orangish red fruits that form this time of year, summertime. And you can still see the green unripe fruits as well. So we'll just have a go at removing the crown of this plant. As I said, it's a large plant, but all we need to do is deal with the crown. So in order to do that, we're going to have to clear away all these canes that are at the bottom of the plant. Okay. Yeah, so we've got a massive root system here. And unlike some of the other asparagus weed species, this one doesn't form distinct tubers on the roots. The roots themselves act as storage organs, and they're quite swollen and a bit fleshy. And then what we'll have to do, of course, is remove the crown. So we're going to cut through all these roots. These roots won't resprout. They're just storage organs. They're not growing points. So it's often easier just to come in and get the crown out and kill it. It's starting to come out. Whoop, there we go. This will have to be disposed of either in deep burial, burned, or with the general rubbish, because it will regrow. So we've now killed this plant. We've removed many of the seedlings that have cropped up in the area. There are a couple of other smaller plants nearby that we're killing, which will effectively control this southernmost infestation of Asparagus africanus. But importantly, these plants are still present in people's gardens. They're no longer for sale, but they are still present in gardens. So you can help protect Australia's environment from asparagus weeds and other weeds by making sure they're no longer growing in your garden. Dispose of them properly, dig them up out of your garden, put them in the bin, and don't let them spread into bushland.
But there's one last thing. Look out for the native asparagus. Asparagus racemosus is a vine or small shrub that can be easily mistaken for Asparagus africanus or Asparagus plumosus. The key difference is that the native species has longer leaflets, or cladodes, that grow to 3 centimetres. It occurs in northern Australia, south to around Brisbane. Clear identification between the native and weedy asparagus is imperative because their distribution and habitats can overlap. For more information on controlling asparagus weeds and other ones, see the Weeds Australia website.